And we are live. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast, everybody. My name is Rory Paquette, and I am, as always, your very humble, gracious, undeserving host. Cannot wait to get into this today. Got a friend of mine on tonight who does some really cool stuff, is a guardian of the Second Amendment. You spend 5 minutes listening to this guy, you realize the wealth of knowledge he has about guns, about the law, about what he's doing. I mean, it's really incredible. When he goes live, even if I'm half asleep, I'm like, I got to see what he's talking about today. So I try and get on his live, even if it's, midnight or whatever it is, because this guy, I don't think he sleeps. He just keeps going around the clock to protect the Second Amendment. It's really awesome. Welcome to the show, Steve Zimmermann. How you doing, Steve?
Good, thank you. And that was a very, very gracious opening for me. Like very few times in my life do people give me such kind words. So thank you very much.
You make me tear up now, man. Listen, I love that you're on. I really do.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Um, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. You very right up front, in case somebody doesn't know you, then it's Steve Zimmerman, and there's two M's at the beginning and two N's at the end. Okay, in
Two
case
M's,
anybody's looking
two
for you.
N's. Yep.
Right
Just to
on,
make things so complicated for people.
right on. And you have two Instagram accounts that you
Actually,
operate.
actually, I got three.
Oh, okay. Why don't you go ahead and give all three to our listeners right off bat?
All right. So my personal Instagram is the Steve Zimmerman. Um, and that's only on Instagram. My Facebook profile is different. Um, But then I actually have my own podcast, which we need to get you on eventually, which is the Range Minded podcast, where we deal pretty much primarily with educating folks on the Second Amendment, really push training and education. What we really want is to create good stewards of the Second Amendment. So on that podcast, on that Instagram feed is Range Minded podcast, and we're also on YouTube and anywhere else you get your free podcast. You can listen to us anywhere.
Awesome. You guys are on all the regular platforms and stuff, right? I mean, I found you, pretty easily. So, all right. Yeah, I'm definitely a listener, man. Season two is season two, episode three. Is that what we're on right now?
Yeah, we're at 203 episodes now.
23. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I was going
Yeah,
to
we've
say
been doing
because
it for a little while.
yeah, I guess you are. No, man, that's fantastic. That really is. This is such an important topic. You know what I mean? When it comes to the Second Amendment and everything that's going on in the world, even somebody who doesn't own a gun, if you just believe that you should have the right to be able to own a gun, I mean, you got to wake up, you got to smell the coffee, you got to get a little involved these days.
Yeah.
Used to be, if you were like, hey, I really don't want a gun in my house, you kind of considered yourself to not really be a Second Amendment type person. But now that the prospect is that it could just be eliminated, because law doesn't matter anymore, um, it's huge, and more than ever, people are looking for people like you, in your podcast and stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to
Oh, I
have
hope
you
so.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Before we get into all the actual nuts and bolts of what's happening, and there's plenty. So,
There's
um,
so, there's so much to talk about.
there really is, and obviously we can't cover it all, but there are two big things I want to talk about and get your opinion on and let people hear it. But before we get there, what makes you're from Idaho, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. I saw
Southeast
that.
Idaho.
I follow you on Instagram, so I saw something about the snow layering on
Oh
top of
yeah.
the snow.
It's been brutally cold here the last few days.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Um, what makes a mild mannered carpenter from Idaho decide he wants to do this with the Second Amendment podcast, the whole bit, everything else? What got you into this, brother?
Well, that's actually a pretty dang good question. So I didn't really get involved. I didn't grow up in a house with firearms. We had my grandpa's shotgun that was given to us, and my dad had a black powder rifle that he put together. Other than that, we never had guns in the house growing up. Um, my brother, my older brother, he was always kind of he liked guns and whatever. He ended up giving me my first rifle at 17 on my 17th birthday at the behest of my parents. Not that my parents were anti-gun either. Like they're definitely pro Second Amendment. It wasn't a priority in the house. But once I got that SKS for my 17th birthday, man, it was a downward spiral from there, in a good way. Uh, and I just love everything about firearms. The smell, the feel, the mechanics. I think they're mechanical works of art. Um, so fast forward a few years, I decided I would become an NRA instructor. So I went and took a few classes and became certified pistol through the NRA, which honestly, looking back now, that really means nothing, honestly, because their curriculum is so terrible. Um, After that, I
Ouch.
became a range safety officer, and then I'm a certified instructor through USCCA. In between all that stuff, I managed a range here in Idaho Falls, and then a buddy of mine opened a range in Boise, and I went over there and helped run the range in Boise for a few years. Uh, and that's where the podcast anyway started, was in Boise at Independence Indoor Shooting. Uh, and our goal then was to create good stewards of the Second Amendment, because you're selling guns at the counter. You realize there's people from all walks of life, honestly, all political affiliations coming in, looking at firearms, looking at ways to defend themselves. But there was such a disparity of information, right? You get guys that know everything, and then you get these rookies, I guess you could call them, that are just starting their journey, and they don't know where to turn. So we decided, hey, let's develop a podcast that's hopefully easy to listen to, and give them some good information to where they can start step by step their journey through the Second Amendment.
Wow, man. I mean, it's needed for sure.
I
Um,
think so.
and how long have you been doing the podcast, just time wise?
2016 or 2017. There was a few months where we didn't do anything with it. When I left Boise to come back here to the southeastern side of the state, it was just, there was so much going on that I just didn't really have time to dedicate to it. So we probably missed a good 6 months of content. And then I decided, hey man, I gotta keep this going. So I want to say 2017, somewhere around there, maybe 2016. I really honestly can't remember.
You've been doing this for like 6, 7 years.
Maybe. I sure doesn't feel
Wow,
that long.
brother.
Might be.
That's awesome. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, this is the type of thing that has stood the test of time for you, but you've been at it that long. I
Yeah,
mean,
I try. I
most
try.
people don't make it past 20 episodes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, we
just
knew we definitely wanted to get past that. And honestly, I actually have a background in radio too. I used to be a top 40 DJ, not a good one by any means, but that was my start to the radio side. And then Mark, who was used to be part of the podcast, he was a big time in radio in Boise. So we had a lot of opportunity to make some good audio, and mixed in there with some, where we kind of had an idea how to do it anyways.
sure. Sure. Well, I mean, like I said, it's needed, and I'm glad that you stuck it out because, you were doing the podcast when all this wasn't really under siege the way that
Yeah.
it is now, and so
Well,
now,
it really has been. It's just that some of that stuff wasn't really in the forefront, because
really,
there are some things that have changed. Supreme Court, rulings that have made a huge difference to the Second Amendment in a positive way. And that's what I've been trying to dedicate the last few episodes of the podcast on, honestly, are some of the
Mhm.
last or most recent decisions from the Supreme Court.
Right? Okay. I mean, that's
I mean,
I,
there's so much, dude. It's not just vertical up and down, but it is such a broad topic that I mean, I'm no expert by any means, no expert, but there's just so much content that you could never run out of things to talk to if people are interested in listening to it.
well, let's get into a couple of those things. We kind of outlined, who you are, what you want to do, why you're doing it. That's, awesome. There's a couple of big things that are going on right now in the government. I mean, two that sort of have the headlines and are sort of, the lawsuits are coming, and they're going to
Yeah.
be in the news. And when we were in our pregame, both of us are, kind of acknowledging everybody just jumps into their tribe and speaks their speak, and nobody really thinks anymore. But you're out there actually reading the bills to people, and saying, here's what's actually like written into
Right.
this bill. Here's where you could find it for yourself. So you don't have to just trust a talking head. You
And,
can
and
read your own bill here.
and I'm so opinionated that, and if you've listened to any of the episodes of the podcast, you realize that I tend to like stray off into the weeds once in a while. Almost every episode, like I stray off, and I end up doing this monologue usually every episode. But I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just my views or my opinions that are sliding the content. I want to read what's written in the rulings of the Supreme Court, so people know that it's not just some bald guy being bored on a live or whatever, a podcast, just blabbing around. I want to give the meat and potatoes so they know what's going on.
Well, and it's important that you do that. To be completely honest, I mean, I've heard your podcast. I follow it. I listen to it. The fact that you do it the way you do it gives you instant credibility because anybody who's sitting there thinking, "Oh, he's just some like Trumpster," you know what I mean, is
Yeah.
going to listen and go, "Wait a minute, he's reading the actual like literature. This is not made up. This is not pomp and circumstance. This isn't like right wing, food for the brain. He's reading the law." And it's really, really good that you take the time to do that because anybody who's listening to the podcast immediately goes, "Guy's credible. What's he got to say?"
I hope
You know,
so. I hope
yeah,
so.
it comes through that way. So I'm glad you do it that way, man. The pistol brace
Oh yes,
rules.
the
Now,
dreaded final rule on the pistol braces.
all right, I'm going to let you go with this, okay? But just so to set the stage for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, this is like literally someone who has trouble holding a handgun. It's a brace
Mhm.
to help hold the gun. Okay, I mean it's not like an extra clip. It's not a laser beam. It's we're
No,
talking about a brace. Okay,
right.
and
So in
go ahead.
2012, a company submitted an arm brace because they noticed that a wounded veteran friend of theirs, they take him shooting. AR pistols have actually been around quite a while. Just imagine a short AR-15. It was considered a handgun, still is considered a handgun. Anyway, this guy noticed that taking his wounded veteran friend shooting, he had a hard time controlling the AR-15. So A, it's not safe, and B, it's not fun for the guy if he can't really, control the firearm the way that it's intended. So he designed this brace, he submitted it to the ATF. ATF was all on board, say, yep, absolutely, we like the idea. Go ahead and start manufacturing. So I can't remember the guy's name, but he got involved with SIG. They developed a SIG arm brace, which was really the first commercially available brace in 2012. And for between 2012 and what we are now, 23, honestly,
Mhm.
yeah, they submitted the final rule on January 13th, 2003, 23. Uh, Everything was kosher, right? It was cool. You could have the brace on your firearm, no big deal. Well, suddenly the ATF, under the direction of the president, who is very anti-gun,
Yeah,
like
go
him not.
figure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I'm not going to talk about the president, but it's better that we don't. So Merrick Garland signed a letter saying, yeah, these are now considered stocks. So then they fall under the NFA, which was an act that was created in 1934, which says anything that's a short-barreled rifle would have to be submitted. You have to submit paperwork and photos of the firearm, any kind of information that's engraved on the firearm. Not all has to get submitted to the feds, so they know who owns the gun. You have to always be in possession of it. It's a nightmare. So they decided, the ATF said, yep, those are now considered stocks, not pistols. And if you can shoulder it, then you have to submit it to the ATF. It'll fall under the National Firearms Act. So needless to say, I mean, we could go, if you want to go deep into the woods of like common use and that kind of stuff, we can talk about that. Let's just say this, in a case that was ruled by the Supreme Court, DC versus Heller, they put a threshold at 250,000 as common use, meaning you can't make something illegal if there's more than 200 or 200,000 of them. So they don't even know how many pistol braces are out there. They figure it's somewhere between 3 and 40 million. I would consider that pretty common use.
Pretty common use. Yeah.
So that already bypasses whatever rule they make. ATF is not Congress makes laws, not an agency. They have no way to make laws. And so it's a major issue with the gun crowd right now, me included. Um, it's just such a convoluted mess. And the ATF, honestly, yesterday or the day before, had a Q&A, and they just made things worse because they weren't really answering any questions. They just read the letter. And I noticed, I was watching the live feed. Anytime somebody would type in a question, they would just tap a link, say, hey, any questions can be answered at this link. They weren't answering any questions.
Right.
So it's made to be arbitrary, so they can use it as a big dragnet, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now the NFA is basically that was the second thing I wanted to talk about, in terms of that. But this is coming down as practically speaking a gun registry.
Yes, it is absolutely a registry. So anything that falls under the NFA, that's suppressors, that's short-barreled shotguns, fully automatics, short-barreled rifles. Anything that falls under the NFA is registered with the federal government. They know exactly where those items are. And if you don't, it's 10 years in prison and $250,000 fine. So it's very compelling for people to follow that rule. So what would happen is suddenly all 40 million, which I think is actually a low number. I think it's probably greater than 40 million firearms with arm braces on them. They would have to be registered with the NFA. Then the feds could easily say, well, they have this AR, they probably have more ARs, and now they can go into your home at any time. And that's not hyperbole. They have the authorization to do that when you register something under the NFA.
Right.
So it is such
That's your
a
probable
mess.
cause written right in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've given themselves so many avenues to do whatever they want because it's so arbitrary. Any agent could interpret the rule any way they want at any time.
And they are right now is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
120-day period right now that gives people the grace period, where they can register their NFA item, their new NFA item, without the $200 tax stamp, which the ATF has no authority to forego taxes. That's not the Department of Justice's job. So I don't know how they're doing a forbearance on the tax. Really, what it is they'll just say you don't have to pay the tax, but then the feds will come back and say, hey, you owe us $200. So it's a catch-all. It is not. It is not good.
Now, doesn't the NFA does not or does, and clarify for me, impact regular run-of-the-mill handgun?
It does not. So in the original drafted bill, okay, I got to stay out of the weeds because I could go off on the president at the time too. The original bill drafted did include handguns, but then they realized that you can't include handguns because at the time, this just come out of the Great Depression. There's people that still needed to provide, so they made sure anything. Well, the original NFA also had rifles, anything under 18 inches for rifle length was a problem, but they screwed up. They actually sold federals. They sold carbines, M1 carbines that were 16 inches. So they actually broke their own law. So they had to come back and revise it. Side note. See, I go in the weeds. I get
It's okay.
excited. So,
That wasn't too bad in the weeds. That was sort of like, on the edge of the weeds, but you came back. So we're all right.
so handguns were originally included, but then they realized that was absolutely ridiculous. So they took revolvers and semi-automatic handguns out of the NFA in 1934.
Okay. And so what's happening with it now? It's not that they're trying to enforce something that's on the books. They've changed it.
Yeah, they just changed the interpretation, which is funny because in some of that Q&A that they did, I guess they did answer some questions. Somebody asked do I have to destroy the arm brace if I take it off? And the ATF said, well, and this is not like verbatim, but this is the gist is what they said. Well, you take the gun out of the drawer, you take the brace off and put it in a different drawer and you're fine.
I
So
heard
it's
you
not
talk
even
about this the other night. Yeah.
yeah, it has nothing to do with the brace, honestly. It has everything to do with just taking it off, which is funny because then they have something else called constructive intent, which if I had a stock that I could put on my pistol, which makes it an NFA item, then it could get me with constructive intent. So their rules make no sense whatsoever.
Because obviously you have the intent. Otherwise, why would you own the piece?
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
and let me say this too, like I am not an attorney. Don't take my advice as any kind of legal advice. I will not tell you what I think you should do if you do have pistol braces. To talk to your attorney, find somebody that is a good, solid 2A attorney, and consult with them. If you take legal advice from me, you're a fool. Don't do that. Talk to an
Right.
attorney.
This is not a legal advice show. Absolutely
No.
not. And yeah, so it's probably good though with everything going on to throw that out there. We are not endorsing any of this stuff. We're not
No.
saying, hey, this is how it should be. We're simply talking about something that's happening in the public and that's happening within our government. And that's a change, that
Yeah.
anybody
And I
who's
know
a
what
gun
I'm
owner
gonna
needs to know.
do. I know what I'm gonna do with my braces. Because the feds know I have braces. I purchased them online. They know what I have. Like it's
Right.
not that hard for them to find out what I have. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna say what I'm gonna do, um, because it's a personal decision. So
Absolutely. Well, as everything should be, I mean, that's kind of where the Constitution comes from in the first place,
yeah,
is, your personal liberties,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. It's
which
funny how that works.
have apparently just gotten thrown by the wayside in too many ways. But
Yeah,
all right, so that's two of the biggest things that are going on in that area.
and
Um,
And honestly, like the pistol brace thing just keeps getting more and more muddy. Um, I mean, I've talked about it a couple times, well, at least referenced it like 3 or 4 times on the podcast. Um, and so just stay tuned if you want to learn more about it. I have read all. It's like a 300-page letter. I read into about 60 pages, and I got so annoyed with what I was reading because nothing makes sense in the letter at all. So I made it 60 pages. The last probably 50 pages are all just pictures. Honestly, it's so dumb.
That stuff just makes me shake my head. I'm sorry. I just, you know, your friend Nick Hoffer was,
Mhm.
on the show. He and I had a brief conversation about the same type of thing. At some point, all you can do is just shake your head, put up your
Yeah,
hands, and go. I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't know.
yeah. It is such a mess. And honestly, I don't. I guess I'll put it this way. I think both sides of the aisle are okay with the direction the country's going right now. Just one side of the aisle might be getting us there a little bit quicker. There are good people on, from all sorts of political affiliations. There are good, God fearing, gun owning Democrats that understand and love the Second Amendment. I've been chewed out by many, assuming, making some stupid comments at the gun counter and then getting chewed out because they voted for Hillary Clinton, but they're buying guns and they love the Second Amendment. Man, that was not a conversation I'll forget. Um, there are good people on both sides of the aisle that want the Constitution to prevail. It's just that there are a noisy few that are just making a mess.
Wow. And we've got government agencies at this point that are like literally making their own rules.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's not like it's going through Congress and being passed as a law. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, a whole different ballgame.
yeah.
I mean, everybody's just sort of self-interpreting everything as they go, you
Well,
know?
there've been such leeways given to like EPA and the ATF and some other agencies where they'll just say, "Well, we've got authority under the department, like the ATF, for example. We got authority under the DOJ. We'll do this and we'll just enforce it."
Right.
Well, it's not a law then it's just a rule, and rules can be bent or broken without any recourse. It's laws that cause problems. So eh, there's some things I think have changed this session, honestly, some good things that have happened. So hopefully we'll see some recourse there.
Now, I remember hearing, I'm not sure if it was on one of your lives or on your podcast, but you or someone you had on actually mentioned there's a bunch of lawsuits that are coming
Oh
from
man,
states
so
or something or from
as
different
far as
organizations.
far as the pistol brace rule,
Is that what it's about? Yeah.
yeah, so there are pretty much all the major firearms uh, pro Second Amendment firearms groups. They
Hmm.
have all filed lawsuits in various states. Some of them they won't even say what state they're in because they don't want to give any opportunity to the anti-gunners. But North Dakota's filed one, Florida's filed one. There's one in Texas. I really wish we could see one in our district on this side of the country. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. That there's already a massive amount of lawsuits that are being filed. I really, I really believe that it's not gonna survive the court system. It could be like I said, I referenced earlier. There are a lot of really good Supreme Court rulings that they are going to get scrutinized by drastically, and they'll just get cut to pieces, in my opinion. Hopefully, anyways.
See, now they have to know that too. So
Oh, they do know that.
what do you suppose the end game is? Is it all just political posturing to say, look what we did, and then they downplay the fact that it got beaten and just defeated?
So
In
I've
your
been watching
opinion, just in your opinion.
I've been watching a lot of I remember the assault weapons ban in '94, and everything that comes up since then. What they like to do is they like to go way extreme because they know it's going to get dismantled in court, and then as it goes through the district courts and then the Supreme Court, it gets dismantled, and then they're just happy with whatever they get. But if they get more, then they're ecstatic. So in my opinion, I think they make things so extreme and so crazy that they're trying to get as much as they can because they know they'll get something.
So that's what it is. They're just asking for everything they can think of so that when it gets whittled down, there's more left at the end.
Yeah,
Still sit in the basket. That's interesting.
and then I
Interesting
also think
strategy.
that I think they like to. I think they maybe it's trolling, honestly, from the ATF. They like to make things so ridiculous, in my perspective, that they get people talking about it, and then I think it just distracts them so they can work on other things. So it keeps the pro 2A crowd busy while they can do something
Hmm.
else.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
No,
you're good.
I hear you. That's a whole other. You want to talk about getting into the weeds? That's a whole other rabbit hole about getting getting somebody off track and
Well,
hey, look at this hand and don't look what this hand's doing.
distraction's been a tool since the beginning of time.
Hmm.
And you're drinking your beverage. I got to open mine.
Oh, dang! You know what? Have at it. Absolutely.
The
And
official beverage. Actually, they're not official. I'm not sponsored by Bundaberg Ginger Beer, but I love it.
well, since you brought it up, I mean, if you're a friend of the program, you know that over here, Power Man is drinking Freedom Hill Coffee. Like you find them at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful, just like my wife. And they do all the right things for all the right reasons to make a great cup of Joe, and they support veterans, which is why I support them. So yeah, let's take a sip of the preferred beverage on my end.
Nice. In the biz, they call it a segue, and I think it worked beautifully.
That was good. Thank you you did that. I appreciate the help. That's right. Free of charge. Yeah.
That's right.
No, man, it's all good. Um, Steve, I know that you've got a wealth of knowledge on these topics. Okay. And sharing it with people, putting it out there helps the average guy who doesn't have that kind of time to just kind of go, hey, where do I go to look? Where are some of the resources that you go to find some of the stuff where, a guy who's too busy to do what you do, okay, maybe he doesn't have the passion that you have for it, but is still concerned. Where can somebody go and get, a few snacks of info to, kind of feed them and get them along?
Well, the very first place they should go is the Range Minded podcast. The very first place they
Good
should go.
answer. Good answer. Right on. All right. Range Minded Podcast. Absolutely available on all the
But
regular platforms.
there are some amazing resources on YouTube that are pretty recent, honestly, recent channels. The Armed Attorneys, they're a couple of attorneys from Texas. They have a fairly new YouTube channel, and it's actually exploding within the community. They're awesome. Their content is great. They're attorneys, so they understand the dialogue and the bills, and they can translate it for us normal people to understand. So yeah, it's the Armed Attorneys. Another fantastic one is the Four Boxes Diner. He's actually he does something on the Supreme Court. I can't remember what it is, but so he really understands um, all the legalese that come out of all these stupid letters from the ATF. Very intelligent man. At one point, I'm going to have him on the show. I don't know how that's going to happen because he's way outside my league. But hey, you got to swing for the fences, right? Um, Coleon Noir, who's got an interesting life story and how he got where he is now. He's a big influencer in the 2A community.
Hmm.
Um, he's kind of a little bit more bougie, I guess. I don't know how you call it. He's a high dollar guy. He's an attorney. He loves fancy cars and expensive guns, but he still has some good content. And honestly, there's a lot of other awesome stuff out there. There's some stuff that gets kind of boring or lame. I kind of gotten too old for some of the 2A content on YouTube. Some of it's just the same thing over and over again. Gun reviews. I understand a lot of the firearms. I don't necessarily need to watch a lot of gun reviews anymore. I've noticed that I've started to lean more towards either going direct to the ATF's website or leaning heavily on Armed Attorneys or Four Boxes Diner. And the Armed Scholar is another awesome YouTube channel as well.
That's great. I'm sure everybody appreciates having those resources. But if you want to have all of that stuff all wrapped into one with, a good opinion on it and everything else, you go to the Range Minded Podcast.
Well, I'm definitely opinionated.
That's what you do. That's exactly right. Well, you're passionate, man, which is one of the
Oh
things I
yeah,
love about
passionate.
you.
Yeah, that's another way to say it, I guess.
Absolutely
Passionate.
passionate about what you do, which is, it comes through in everything that you do. And it's one of the reasons why, I appreciate, everything that you do out there. So don't stop doing it, brother. Okay. Just
I'll
keep taking
keep
the
plugging
punches
along.
and keep plugging along. Right on. I love that. The, what, have you had any, let's get into the personal aspect of this. Have you had any, blowback, for instance, from family, wife, friends, kids, anything like that about being such an outspoken advocate?
I've carried a firearm for a long time, so my family gets kind of used to that aspect of my life. Honestly, my wife still gets annoyed. Like, we'll be running to the grocery store and I'm getting a gun out of the safe to put on, and she'll wonder why I'm doing it. I realize I have to live what I preach, right? I can't just be a hypocrite and tell you to do something that I'm not doing. Um, Honestly, my family's been really supportive. My mom and dad are awesome. Um, my wife, like she actually grew up. My father-in-law's a gun collector, so she's been around firearms her whole life. She doesn't really like shooting, but she's been around guns and she understands kind of that culture. My kids are growing up in that culture, um, and my son, if he was here, he'd tell you like we'll go to the restaurants and I've got him looking for exits and watching people's faces and reading the room. He's kind of like my eyes on the back of my head.
Nice.
We kind of do team tactics once in a while when we go to a restaurant. So as far as close family, no. I do have some liberal family that I've tried to come, get them to go to the range, but they won't do it, which is fine. That's their. I'm not going to force them to it.
Right. No, no serious blowback though. Then I mean, the haters haven't really gotten to you, and they're certainly not.
No, I'll get once in a while like somebody on Instagram. What they call me? I referenced it in the live, or no, it was one of the podcasts. Another bald. Some I don't know. They said something stupid. That stuff used to offend me, but honestly, I'd rather offend people because then I know they're listening to me.
Right.
So, I let the hate come. I'm not worried about it. I got pretty tough skin.
Good deal. No death threats then yet, huh?
I don't care if I did anyways. Everybody needs a good gunfight at least once a month.
Oh, there you go. All right, that's what we needed to hear in a podcast at least once. So thanks, thanks for that, Steve.
I don't condone violence. If you saw my last post, I don't
There
condone
you go.
violence.
No, we absolutely know that for sure. That's certainly not what's going on. But no, I appreciate that. That's one of the hardest parts about anybody who does any kind of a podcast that has any kind of a backbone, any kind of grit to it, is that there's always trolls. There's always
Oh,
haters.
yeah.
There's always people who are trying to line up and tell you, hey, you go die. You know what I mean? And with as passionate as you are, you know what I mean, about what you're doing, and as long as you've been doing it, um, that's awesome. That you haven't really had that kind of pile on and that kind of nonsense, and maybe most of it is because there's no point. I mean, you come across so
I
confident,
hope.
so positive, and so passionate about it. Nobody actually thinks they're going to change your mind.
Yeah.
you know,
We were actually talking about this off the air. I was watching this YouTube video of some super lefty guy, and they were talking about Donald Trump, and it was I wanted to fight through it because honestly, I need to hear the other side. I want to hear the other arguments, so then I know what they're thinking and how they get there. But it's sure tough. So I imagine people that are listening to me that don't agree with me, they probably think I'm terrible, but I honestly don't care. I don't care what people's feelings. They can get hurt all they want. I don't care.
that's the only way to be successful at what you're doing. So and maybe it's that too. Maybe it's the fact that you've been doing it for so long. Everybody's like, look, he's been here forever. There's no point in threatening him to get off there. He's not gonna.
Yeah, I'm not going to listen. And it's sad.
So,
I should have got on YouTube when we first started this. Years ago. I just recently was started pushing videos on YouTube. There's only a few of them on there. And it's tough. YouTube's tough, and it is getting way worse for Pro 2A people.
mhm.
They're shutting down accounts right now. Just
Yeah.
it's tough. So I don't know. We talked a little while ago, not before the show, but a while ago about getting onto some other platforms, but they're not. They're just not as user friendly as YouTube is, which sucks.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I'm using all the same platforms, so I know what you mean. We don't necessarily, put ourselves out as like some big pro 2A, necessarily, but everybody who listens to us knows we are,
Yeah.
over here. So, but we get all of the masculinity blowback,
Oh,
So,
sure.
oh, power man. Oh, okay. Well, you got to have power over women to feel good about yourself. I'm like, have
Which
you
which
ever
is
listened to
so
anything we've
ridiculous.
said?
So ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah. We have a
um,
very strong female following, actually,
that's
that
good
comment a lot.
because
Um,
there's ladies that understand that that there needs to be somebody there as a protector and a provider.
right.
Uh, they're supposed to be the nurturer.
Yeah. The podcast is coming out today. I'm actually going to release it after you and I get done talking. It's about that. It's about leadership,
Yeah.
and leading your family and everything else, and how most wives actually want their husbands to lead them. You know,
Which makes me so worried about the future. Because that's how I'm trying to raise my daughters. I got 3 daughters, and
God
hopefully
bless
I'm
you,
an
man.
example.
God bless you. I'm sorry, but
Oof,
God bless you. I have
there's days
one.
it's
I
really
can't even
tough.
imagine what you just said to me. I have one, and oh my God.
Yeah, dude, it can be tough. And I don't know how old your daughter is. My oldest daughter, she's 18, 17, and she's pretty solid. She had a lot of attitude as when she first became a teenager, but she's grown out of it. She's absolutely awesome. And then my second daughter, she's a little bit more free spirited, I guess, a little more willing to push the envelope when it comes to listening to me. But my youngest daughter, oh boy, I am scared to death because she is an adventurer. She's not scared of anything. She doesn't. I guess she's like me in a way. She just doesn't care. She'll do it, and whatever happens, happens. So I'm a little scared.
Well, you're ahead of the game because that's the one that's going to turn your hair white,
Well, it's gone, so it
and
doesn't
you're ahead
matter.
of the game, brother. Exactly. My daughter is 29. She turns 30 this year.
Right on.
And yeah, so she hates that. And I'm sure it'll end up by the time she turns 30, it'll end up being my fault somehow, that she's turning 30. So but yeah, it's really funny because when it comes to our kids, I have three also. I've got a daughter and two boys. And my daughter is my flaming liberal progressive. I have no idea how it happened from my first marriage, so on and so forth, takes after her mother in that way. Loves to just basically torture me. Love her anyway, would take a bullet for
Right.
her. Then I got my son, who is my oldest son, but he's my middle child. He's very much a moderate. He's a fiscal conservative, but socially he leans a little more towards like, hey, kind of relax about stuff.
Yeah.
My youngest is like just devout, dyed in the wool conservative.
Nice.
Like how to, don't even talk to him about it because he is in his tribe. He lives there. He believes there. He eats there. He doesn't want to hear anything. So,
And
you
how
know,
old is he? Is he still in high school or she graduated?
no, he graduated high school and he is 18 years old. So he's gonna turn 19 this year.
Is he
So
planning
it's
on going to school though? Is he going to go to college?
I don't think so. Only because he's involved in a sales thing.
Oh yeah.
And he's making huge money at 18.
My my
So
neighbor does that. Well, he was doing like security systems, but he was in charge. I don't know if he was like a regional guy or whatever, but he would pull down like $500,000 in 6 months, and then just whatever.
that's exactly what he's doing. It's not security systems, pest control, but he's doing the exact same thing. He's working
That's
like
good.
5 months out of the year and
He
making.
can sell, dude. He's gonna do well.
I tell you what, he just knocks on doors and just kills it.
Yeah,
And
and it's
he's
good
like,
for him
Dad,
too.
I'm gonna.
What a good experience to be able to communicate with people you don't know, right? And
Absolutely.
overcome concerns or whatever.
Oh,
That's a skill that will come in handy with the rest of his life.
I've been in sales almost my entire life, and I told him if you can door to door, you can do anything.
Yeah,
So he's doing that. So
that's
yeah, it's
awesome.
it's crazy. But I mean, I know we have that in common and stuff. So in terms of having the kids, but
Yeah.
um, how does your I ask a lot of my guys this. My wife's always been very supportive of what I've done here. I tell the story about how, when I first bought the equipment, it's like sat in a box. I had the idea, stuff sat in a box for like 4 months. And I was like trying to figure out how I was going to do it, try to be perfect and all this other stuff. My wife, one day, I'm in the middle of talking about it. She goes, why don't you just go record something? And I'm like, well, but I don't. She goes, I don't want to hear another word. Just go record something. If it sucks, it sucks. But just go
Nice.
record something. I said, okay. I came down to my office, I fired it all up, and I started talking, and that was episode one.
Awesome.
And I didn't look back after that. How's your wife feel about all the other stuff you do? You got, the Impractical Tactical, you got the Range Minded podcast, you know what I mean? You're training, you know what I mean? You're doing all this other stuff. How does she feel about all of it to the best that you can explain it to any of our listeners? You know what I mean? Because the wife support thing is always tricky and always really important.
So I'm a carpenter by trade, right? So two days after we got married, I went out of state and worked framing houses. So she's used to me always working. I don't work as hard now as I did 23 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but well, like you said, I do a lot of things. I don't know why I keep adding more. I'm soon to be adding another thing to my plate that it's you guys will all know when it happens. So I don't, why the plate's full. Why add something else? But she
You
has,
sure you don't want to announce it here on Power Man? I mean, this is a great
yeah,
platform for
not
you to
yet.
announce it. You sure?
I gotta have things in order before I say
Okay.
anything.
All right,
So,
man. All right.
uh, but it'll be something you don't even like. You'll be like, why in the heck is he doing that? Anyway,
I'm looking forward to it. All right, man. But go ahead.
so I started the podcast. So when I lived in Boise, I lived in my camper because at that point real estate was absolutely ridiculous. The intent was that I'd live in the camper until it was just going to be a short term thing. I'll find a house, then the family was going to move over. Well, it ended up being like 3 years because every time I'd find a house, it would sell before I could even do anything with it. Like it just nothing was working out. And that whole time frame is when I started the podcast. So she wasn't even ever involved, or she never saw me start the podcast or anything like that. I was working when I was living in my camper. I mean, I'd show up at work at like 5, 6 in the morning and work till about 11:30 at night because I had nothing else to do. And so there was plenty of time to research or do podcasting things or design classes or whatever. So when I got back, the podcast just came with me. So she really didn't have much choice to say, "Well, that's dumb. Why are you doing that?" or that kind of thing. I just do it. I framed in a little room in my basement. You see this fancy clustered wall behind me. I wanted to make it cool. Um, I'm glad you think it looks cool. Our friend Nick, I'm never gonna live it down. He says it's cluttered and ugly, so it's still up there.
I heard the episode where he said that to you too.
I don't think, and I'll let your listeners decide. If they're watching, like what they think of my wall. I think it's cool. I didn't get to go to SHOT Show this year. Otherwise, there'd probably be another patch panel like there is back there, and another sticker thing like I have behind me here. That I love stuff is the problem too. So,
No,
but as far as
that's awesome.
support, she does support me. She's stuck with me. Like I said, we'll be married 23 years this year, which is crazy because I love her more now than I did 23 years ago. I don't know how that works, but it does.
That's how it's supposed to work, brother.
I agree, but
That's
society she
awesome.
doesn't think so.
No, that's good. So she supports you sort of by not being against it.
Yeah, yeah. She used to not be very vocal, but I told her she needs to stand up for herself. Something would happen, whether it was with her family or work or whatever. And I says, "Man, you got to stand up for yourself." And so now she does. And sometimes I think I should never have taught her how to stand up for herself.
Be careful what you wish for.
She will put her foot down at times,
Right on.
which I need. I need it honestly, because if I was left to my own devices, it would probably not be good.
Now, I seem to remember something else. Was she the one who wanted you to put the window in the door?
Oh, the
You've got like a door with a window into your studio there.
yeah.
Is that right?
I don't know. I can't remember if she said so. I was going to put a window in it anyways. But you saw the picture of it, right?
Oh
Where
yeah.
I cut out the AR pistol. Um, I thought it was cool. That's not something that I think she probably intended. She probably just wanted a piece of glass in there, but I was like, no way, this is my room. I'm gonna make it how I want it. So
Right on. Well, that's awesome. Now, okay, let's go ahead and let's help Steve out here. If you're looking at this on YouTube or on Rumble or anywhere else, okay, that we might have it posted, and you're checking it out, check out his wall behind him, and either comment in the YouTube or in the Rumble, or send me a DM. Okay, and we get a lot of DMs.
do you?
A lot of people, I think, and I respect every one of you folks. I think you guys all know this. I respect every single person wanting to keep a little bit of their life private, and a lot of people want to be involved with Power of Man. They love what we're doing. But they don't necessarily want to like put it out there to friends and neighbors or coworkers or anybody else who might see it as, hey, I support something called Power of Man. Because if you don't listen to it, then you really don't know what it is.
Right.
So I respect everybody's anonymity and their right to, kind of appreciate what we do on the down low. And so what folks do, and folks, again, I'm grateful for the way you communicate on this. They send us a lot of DMs because then it's just like personal between me and them. No one else has to know, everything else. So it works out really, really well that way. And so I always want to make sure I invite people to do that. But folks, go ahead and send me a DM or make a comment and tell me and Steve what you think of the wall behind him. Okay. I love it. Nick hates it.
And obviously, so pardon the crudeness, but I consider myself a patch whore. Not that I'll do anything for a patch, but I love patches. So I mean, if you got an extra patch lying around, don't you can send it my way. I'll put it up there on the wall.
Oh, thanks for that. I needed that. I mean, I never thought anybody would work that phrase into one of my podcasts ever. So you win the prize, brother.
Yes.
I mean, wow. All right. Hey, we are PG-13. So, I mean, everybody understands, So,
I I try not to cuss. I tend to honestly, being in construction pretty much my whole working life. I do have a bit of a foul mouth, and I'm trying to do better, but sometimes things slip out. So,
it's funny because I don't think I've ever actually heard you curse.
oh, if I golf or if I'm framing a house, you'll hear things that
All
will
right.
make a sailor jealous.
So you're pretty disciplined on the air then. Is kind of what's going on.
I
Because
try.
yeah, and
I'm not perfect by any
I've seen
means.
some of your lives, man, where it's like you and your crew. You know what I mean? You and your group of guys, your posse, right? And I mean, you guys. I think you were doing it last night. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just dying.
Cody
I was
for
cracking up.
yeah, Cody, he went off a little bit, but if you know who Cody is, Red Right Hand, sorry, plug for him. He
Hmm.
makes some pretty awesome rifles. Uh, he's a little bit more salty than I am on the air, so
Gotcha.
definitely not PG-13.
Well, so fair warning to everybody: when you listen to the Range Minded podcast, that is you at your professional best, man. I mean, you really are.
Yeah,
You come across, you're
I
an authority. It's all good.
I might throw out some mild swear words, but no F word or anything like that. We have had guests drop the F bomb before. Um, I I don't judge anybody. Like, I'm not gonna tell them, hey, cut that out. Maybe I will. There was one. I don't think we ever aired one particular podcast with a friend of mine who was a wounded veteran. Man, he was going off on all sorts of crazy tangents and just saying everything you can imagine. Like, I don't think we ever actually aired that episode. It was it went south so fast, actually.
I understand. I mean, I've had that a few times, where folks were taking a little bit of liberty with it. But, all I do is just kind of I put the warning out there. I'm like, hey, adult content, adult language, just be ready. Don't play this when kids are in the car if you're sensitive, that kind of thing, type of
Probably
deal. But
hearing my dogs bark now. It sounds like my wife just got back and the dogs are going crazy. So if you hear any barking, sorry.
no, it's all good, man. Listen, and I've kept you quite a while, and I really do appreciate it. We've had those two things, the NFA and you know the pistol brace, were two things that I've heard all over the place that I've heard
Yeah,
you talk about. I wanted to make sure that we address those for everybody. I wanted to make sure everybody knew about the Range Minded podcast so that they could follow you, listen to that. If you are a Second Amendment believer, supporter, if you're concerned about what's going on with the country, if you're concerned about where we're going in that general direction, your podcast is like must listen stuff.
I hope so. I mean, that is the point. Like we always say, we're dedicated to good stewards of the Second Amendment, and that comes from education and conversation.
Right.
We talked a little bit about tribalism or whatever. A lot of the guys when I was working the gun counter, working ranges, they just get stuck with the echo chamber stuff. They don't they'll complain about the other side, but they're never willing to have a conversation and figure out why anti-gunners feel that way, or even the content. They'll say, I stupid pistol brace rule, but then you ask them, well, what's in the letter? Well, it just says this. Have you read the letter? No. Well, then why are you arguing about it? You don't know what it is. You just heard somebody else talk about it. So hopefully, when people hear me talk, and that's why I read the bills and stuff like that, is they understand the content, so they can go armed with knowledge, not just a handgun, because that's not really always the problem solver.
For sure. For sure. All right, brother. Best way for anybody out there who's listening to contact you, give me all your stuff.
So we talked about earlier, you can find my personal Instagram, the Steve Zimmermann, Range Minded Podcast, also on Instagram. Twitter is Impractical Tactical, which I'll probably change to the Steve Zimmermann because I got yelled at for not using my own name. But I do the podcast has a Twitter, Range Minded Podcast, Range Minded on YouTube. Eventually, we'll get to some of the other big platforms as well, but anywhere there. And if you are in the area, I love teaching people. I've taught students from 6 years old to 80 years old. I love to teach. If you feel like you need somebody that's not going to be judgmental or whatever, I'd love to help you on your journey in the firearms community. That's the point. Like, that's why I became an instructor, is to help new shooters, uncomfortable shooters. That's why I'm here, and I try to be non-judgmental. So let me know.
Excellent.
I'm always here to help. If you guys want to hear something special on the podcast, just shoot me a DM, and I'll do research and we'll talk about it.
Awesome. Awesome, man. I'll make sure that all those contacts that at least all the ones I can, come up with, because you gave me a lot. I'll make sure that all those contacts are in the show notes for everybody to copy and paste
Yeah,
and use.
honestly, Range Minded Podcast or the Steve Zimmermann on Instagram, that'll get you anywhere you need to go.
Right on. Instagram, best way to go with you then.
Yeah, I tend to spend and a lot of time lately on Twitter, which I don't know why, but usually almost always Instagram.
Well, it's sort of safe again though. So I just
Sort
got
of.
back on it myself. I was off it for a long time.
It can
So
be kind of fun, but a waste of time.
well, for sure. That's a whole other podcast. The waste of time on social media is an entirely other subject
Oh
for
man,
us to deal
time
with. So,
vampires.
all right, brother. Listen, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you very much. And
Awesome.
Steve, thank you for being on today, man.
Thanks for having me, dude. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Folks, listen, one of the reasons why you want to listen to our podcast, one of the reasons why you do listen to our podcast, one of the reasons why we have guys like this, quality men who do what they believe in, who do it with passion, and who do it very well, is because you're worth it. And we want to make sure that we're bringing you stuff that matters. Um, you need to remember every single day, no matter what's going on in your life, that you're worth the fight, you are worth the love, and you are absolutely positively worth the work. All you got to do is just believe it. Until next time.